With chapter 9, we're moving into a new section of our study talking about the relationships that Jesus had with people. We want to ask an important question. This is really important. How do I recognize God's call on my life? Now, I want to lean into a story that's recorded in the Synoptics. That's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Luke tells the story in, I think, the most interesting detail. So we'll dip into Luke chapter 5, verses 1 through 11. It says that one day Jesus was by the lake of Gennesaret, which is what we call the Sea of Galilee. It's a freshwater lake shaped like a harp, which is what Gennesaret means. A bunch of people come out and they're mobbing him because he's so popular. Peter had been fishing through the night with his companions and business partners, James and John, of course, his brother Andrew. The servants are cleaning the net, so their day's work is basically over, and it's not been a good day's work. So when Jesus says, hey, Peter, can I use your boat for a pulpit? Like everyone's pushing him into the water. He gets in the boat, pushes off a little bit from the shore. Peter's in the boat with him. It's a perfect distraction to avoid the work that nobody wants to clean the nets. After Jesus' sermon, which is not recorded, but I'm sure it was a pretty good one, he said to Peter, why don't you put into the deep part of the lake and let down your nets? Which, honestly, is a dumb idea because it's the wrong part of the lake. It's the wrong time of day. Peter's frustrated and he says, Master, we toiled all night and took nothing. But at your word, I will let down the nets. If you want to know the will of God for your life, here is step number one. You have to be willing to say what Peter said, at your word. It may seem like a dumb idea. It may seem like Jesus should stick with carpentry and not fishing. After all, this is your boat, this is your lake, this is your occupation. You know better than him, right? Wrong. Peter obeys, and when he does, like every fish in the lake jumped into the net. And Peter, it says in verse 7, he signaled to his partners on the shore, who are laughing at him now. But the specific word for signals is interesting. It's with the nod of the head. He can't very well wave. His hands are full of net, and it's pulling him into the water. So they hustle out. They get the boats parallel to one another, and they begin pulling in the nets, and fish are careening into the boats. In fact, they were afraid that the boat would sink. There were so many fish. In the midst of all that, in this pile of squirming mackerel, Peter drops to his knees, this is verse 8, and says, depart from me, for I'm a sinful man. And Jesus said, nope, not going to happen. I'm not going to leave you. Rather, you're going to follow me. And she said, don't be afraid, verse 10. From now on, you will be catching men. That is such a unique phrase. In fact, the only other time it's used is in 2 Timothy. God may perhaps grant them repentance, leading to the knowledge of the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will. That's the phrase, being captured by him. What Jesus is telling Peter is, you are going to take live captives for me. And so he did. If you're going to know God's will, Peter's a pretty good model. It starts by saying, Lord, whatever you say. It may sound foolish to me, but whatever you say, at your word, I will do it. Here's the second thing that I think is pretty important. Jesus entered Peter's boat, his occupation, his lake. And Jesus will enter yours as well. To know God's will, to follow God's will, sometimes means that you're called to ministry. That's what it meant for me. To go take live captives from the devil and bring them back to the Lord. That's my vocational job. That doesn't mean it has to be yours. For some people, it doesn't mean that you give up your vocation to go into ministry. It might mean that you give over your vocation for ministry, so that you build houses for the glory of God, that you help people with their finances for the glory of God. If you're a nurse or a teacher or a coach, that is your church. That is your ministry. And God may put you as a shepherd over that flock. Here's the third thing. I think it's a big one. God gives you abilities at birth. And of course, we work on them and develop them and hone them for God's glory and honor. What God is asking for you is not the ability that He gave you, or that's not all He's asking you. He needs more than your ability. He needs your availability. And again, if He says, let down your nets, even if you think it's a bad idea, you let down your nets because He is Lord. And you will never reach the full extent of your calling from God until you reach full obedience to what He's asking you to do right now. I think a lot of people look at the future and say, what does God want me to do in the future? What does God want me to do 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Well, let's start with this. What's He asking you to do today? Let's go take some live captives for Him.